Today's episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the relationship between your rehab and your metabolic health. We've touched a lot on the importance of building muscle as you're recovering from back pain. And I know many of you that watch this are members or have been watching the podcast for some time, and you're working on improving your lower back health by resistance training, etc. And that's awesome. But sometimes for a lot of our members, we find, and a lot of our watchers, we find that maybe you're not a gym goer. You're not someone who has been training for a long period of time. And quite frankly, this working out business, sometimes it's kind of gets in the way a little bit and we'd rather be doing other things, which is completely understandable. And we think, okay, well, I'm doing it as long as I need to till my back's better, but then I'll kind of stop, or the temptation to stop sets in. Now, many of you will know better than that, and you've got to keep up that consistency for the long term. But today, hopefully, we'll be able to cover an additional, perhaps unforeseen, unknown benefit that building that muscle tissue that's going to protect your back, whatever the condition is going on down there, is also going to improve your overall health and well-being. It's really worthwhile doing. And at times when you're perhaps not feeling like keeping up the consistency of your exercising regime, keeping up the consistency of those workouts 3, 4, 5 times a week, this will be one of those other things that kind of just motivates you, spurs you, pushes you on to keep up that consistency and keep getting the results, not only for your back and keeping your back pain at bay, your sciatica at bay, but also keeping you feeling good and being healthy on the inside as well for the long term. So this will hopefully be just another little bit of motivation for you to keep up the good work, looking after your body, your back, and sort of everything all together. So we'll start off with sort of what is your metabolic health, because for some, it can be completely off the radar. And simply put, it's the ability of your body to take on board some resources. Predominantly, we're going to be talking about protein, fats, carbohydrate, break it down to its constituent elements. In the case of fats, fatty acids, it's going to break the protein down into amino acids, and then it's going to break those carbohydrates down into sugars. It's then going to process them throughout the body, send them where they need to go, and do stuff with them, whether it's build something, whether it's use it for energy, whether it's do whatever, make a hormone, etc., build some muscle. It's going to be used throughout the body. And our metabolic health is our ability to process those resources effectively. And today we're going to be looking particularly at one area, which is going to be the processing of sugar. But the same can be said for many of these other processes. It's our body's ability to function effectively. And a nice example or analogy might be if we're thinking about a building site, because we can kind of all relate to that in many ways. We've got the workers, which are your cells. They're the guys on site that are doing stuff. And every day you get a delivery, or every so often you get a delivery of a big pallet. And on that big pallet, you've got a bunch of bricks. And it is the job of your cells, your body, to break off the wrapping, grab the individual bricks or some of the bricks, take them over to here and build something over here, take them over to here and build something over here. If it's not working properly, the pallet just sits there on the side with the bricks and doesn't get used. And we know from experience, from speaking to members, from patients over the years, some people do have real issues with this. Their body can't process things for effectively for whatever reason, some health conditions, etc. And those guys really, really struggle. And it means you've got to put a lot of work in to overcome some of these challenges, which maybe other conditions kind of superimposed upon the back pain that we might have. And that's a real challenge. But thank God, many of us do not have those additional things to overcome. But things aren't working as well as they should be, or as well as they could be. So it simply put is our body's ability to get hold of those that big pallet of bricks, break off the wrapper, then use those individual bricks to put them somewhere. And that's what we're going to really explore with regards to muscle health and with regards to the relationship between that. Because when we think of sugar, what happens coming into our body is we take on carbohydrates. Many of us know by now, especially with all of the information that's out there these days, is that having lots of refined sugars is not going to be good for us. It's not helpful long term. It creates all sorts of sugar spikes in the blood, and that's a problem. And blood sugar is something that is tightly controlled. It's tightly controlled via our insulin. So when we're taking on board carbohydrates and maybe some element of sugar, natural sugars, maybe through fruit, etc., our body's that's going to get into the blood. We're going to break it down in the gut, etc. And it's going to get into our blood. And then our body's going to go, hey, there's a lot of sugar in here. We need to put it in the right place. So you're going to release insulin. Insulin's going to go and tell all the cells of the body, hey guys, we've had a new delivery and the sugar's running through the hallways. Grab what you need. And therefore all of that sugar is going to be pushed back out to normal levels. And we bring our body back to that level of homeostasis, that level of balance. That's everything being balanced, the right amount of sugar, because you don't want no sugar in the blood, but we don't want too much. And that's something that is tightly regulated. And we won't get into the details of that here, but insulin is a key factor. And what we find in those that have poor metabolic health, that don't look after their body as well as they should do, things start to decline. And these sorts of things, when it comes to metabolic health and those sorts of things, they're not the kind of things where you immediately get a diagnosis and all of a sudden I feel really bad. Like I tripped over, sprained my ankle, and my ankle's bad. These are the kind of things that can be running inefficiently for a long period of time and steadily declining. And we see this in the process of onset of diabetes. Oh, you're pre-diabetic. Well, you've been bad for a long time. Then you get diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Then you become diabetic. And it's a process of degrading of your metabolic health over so many years. And we could maybe draw parallels between our back health as well as our metabolic health, in that both of those often, it is a case of not looking after ourselves for a long period of time. And that then reaches a bite point. Oh, now we've got to do something about it. And often we then have to undo a lot of the bad habits that have built up. Now, in the case of back health, it's moving incorrectly. It's not partaking in exercise. In the case of metabolic health, many of those things are going to cross over. It's being too sedentary. It's having too much of the wrong sorts of foods. It's not fueling our body effectively. But all these things kind of feed and tie in, which is perhaps why it's so relevant that we're talking about these two things together. And then we get on to, okay, well, what relationship does your muscle have in this? Because that sounds like it's, insulin's doing its job. It's your metabolic health is this function inside our body that's doing its thing. Where do the muscles come in? Well, yes, our body is going to use that sugar that's in the system. So when insulin is released, our brain's going to say, hey, I'll have a bit of that. Or other parts of the body, our heart's going to say, hey, I need to have a bit of that. But our muscles have a significant demand for this sugar that's there by way of our glycogen stores. Now, inside all of our muscles, we have these glycogen stores, which are stores of sugar, essentially. So it pours the sugar in and then it processes it and puts it away in this sort of store cupboard, so to speak. And then when the muscles need to do things, they go into the store, pull it out, and they utilize that for the processes of muscular activity. The other thing to bear in mind is that they're going to run out of that, so they're going to need to have it replenished. And this is where things like our basal metabolic rate come in. So as you're building up and doing your rehabilitative exercises, you're building strength, you're building muscle tissue, you're improving the health of the muscle tissue you've got, it's functioning better. It's going to have these glycogen stores. It's going to have to participate in the regulation, in the metabolic processes that are taking place, the regulation of blood sugar. And it's going to have more stored. It's going to act like a big sponge. So all of that work you've been doing with those exercises to build the strength in and around your core, in and around your hips, to make sure that your back's protected, those muscles are going to improve in their function, improve in their health. And the glycogen stores in those muscles are going to help with the regulation of your blood sugars. They're going to help with your metabolic health. They're going to act as a nice sink, a nice sponge to suck out that excess sugar. Because we all know how bad it is to have those high levels of sugar, developing insulin resistance, and then the negative impact on life that can have further down the road if it's not dealt with effectively by way of having type 2 diabetes and all the complications that can have, making general health outcomes worse. So that's a nice sort of example of how building the muscle tissue is going to support the regulation of your metabolic health in that sort of closed environment. It's something that you're already doing if you're doing the right exercises. You're already building that muscle tissue, but it's something that can have so many wide-reaching benefits beyond just having a stronger back, recovering from back pain, and feeling better on a daily basis. It's going to help you in this capacity. And quite often when people have bad health, whether you're watching this because you're more interested in the metabolic health side of things than the back pain side of things, but quite often we can get into a downward negative loop whereby things are getting worse, so we do less, so things get worse, so we feel less empowered, so things get worse, and so on and so forth. But this, going back in the other direction, starting to build up some muscle strength and realizing, oh, my back feels better. Now I'm more active. Now I've got a higher basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate, meaning that my body naturally burns more calories, is operating at a higher level on a daily basis, even when I'm sat still. Now I'm more healthy, metabolically speaking, so I'm going to process the food that I'm eating more effectively. And I'm probably thinking a little bit better about the foods that I do choose. And I'm more active, and my back feels better. And we start to see actually, things can turn around from going down in a very bad direction to up in a very good direction relatively quickly as we start to put all of these pieces in line. So I thought I'd finish off with just understanding that the muscles play an important role in your back health, but also maybe you weren't aware of, now you are, that they're also going to help you with your metabolic health. Key being a regulator of your blood sugar levels, keeping your system working optimally, and guarding you against things like insulin resistance, which can take you down that pathway towards type 2 diabetes. This is very much an overview of the metabolic health side of things. But if we finish up with some action points to help you start to take the steps to improve the muscles, if you haven't already started, to improve the health of those muscles and make some real changes. And the very first and most important thing is if you want to start doing some resistance-based training to build the muscle tissue, protect your back, and also improve your metabolic health by way of increasing muscle tissue, then we want to choose exercises and get the technique right first. It goes without saying, before we get into these 4 steps, you have to do exercises technically correctly. You have to become confident. Otherwise, you're just going to end up getting an injury. And that's the worst thing, because if you have an injury, then all of a sudden you can't exercise, then you put on weight, then you eat badly, then you feel less positive. that drives you more to eating badly, and you do less. And all of these things in terms of our metabolic health, our back health, our bodily health, all decline. So we want to get our technique right first. And especially with the new year coming up, or just around the corner, it will be before we know it, people get into exercise with the best of intentions, but they often miss focusing on technique first and foremost. And then they end up getting an injury midway through January or the back end of January because they haven't focused on this fundamental first. Next thing is exercise selection. Make sure, or the first thing, sorry, is exercise selection once we've got our technique as a priority in our minds. We have to choose the right sort of exercises. Too many people are leading busy lives. They don't particularly necessarily love to go into the gym every day. So we want something that's effective. It's no good if you're thinking, oh, I'll go and do some bicep curls and I'll do some calf raises. That's not an effective use of your time, and it's certainly not building the largest muscles. We want to do movements like the squat, like hip pinch, maybe even like split squats or lunges, which are using multiple joints at the same time and the largest muscle groups. Because a 10% increase in glute size, for example, is going to result in significantly more muscle mass than a 10% increase in our calf size, for example, or our bicep size, for example. It's going to, again, serve as increasing that sponge with reference to metabolic health that's going to soak up that sugar and help improve our body's regulation and ability to process resources effectively and store them effectively. So we want to choose the right exercises. And then we might be doing something like 4 or 5 sets of 10, and we might be doing that a couple of times a week, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Generally speaking, 4 or 5 is best. 3 is kind of going to be maintenance for most people. But that's really what we want to choose. Large, compound, multi-joint movement. So if we think about a squat, we've got our hip hinge. Our hips are going to hinge through that movement. Our knees are going to bend. Our ankles are going to bend. We're going to be going down, coming up. And that's going to use lots of different muscles. It's going to use balance as well. And more importantly, it's a real to life exercise that we're going to be doing. And that's going to have all sorts of benefits, and why it's fundamentally a core or central exercise that we talk about in the Back in Shape program. If you're recovering from back pain, you're doing squats every day. That is a great way to start making some improvements in both your back health and your metabolic health. And the next thing is very important, because once we select the exercises we're doing, we get good at them technically, we want to choose the right intensity. Too many people, especially we see this in the back pain space, they've been doing a 30-second plank for the last 6 months. That's not improvement. And also, additionally, when we're first learning those exercises, we have to understand that when we're learning the technique, we're probably not working that hard, although it might be technically difficult. We're not physically working that hard. So we need to find the right intensity. And quite often ask yourself this, say you're doing this exercise and you're doing 10 reps. What's stopping you do 12? What's stopping you do 15? What's stopping you do 20? Could you do 20 all in one go? If so, probably the wrong resistance. You're not working at the right intensity. You need to increase the intensity. That might be through adding weights. That might be through adding resistance bands, kettlebells, barbells, whatever it is, to make that exercise appropriately challenging. Now, some people will talk about, should I do working to failure when I'm doing these workouts? And that is something that you can do. However, for most of you guys watching us, in most cases, not everybody, but most of our members in the program aren't necessarily people that have a long history of enjoying going to the gym or going to the gym all the time. You're not bodybuilders or athletes, etc., although you might have done that in the past. And so getting back into exercise, especially if we've got an injury, and pushing ourselves to failure is often a recipe for disaster. I would suggest that's more an advanced training strategy, if you will. Instead, work to that kind of point where you think, maybe I've got two reps left in the tank. So if I could do 10, if someone really put a gun to my head and said, do more, you could probably get 1 or 2 more out before your technique started to become a little bit too precarious. So that's kind of finding that right intensity. And that does take a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of exploration. And you have to be competent at your technique first in order to find the right intensity. But if you've chosen the right exercises and then got your technique right, and then found the correct intensity, the correct weight that is challenging you appropriately to hit that sort of 10 reps with 1 or 2 reps left in the tank, then you can start making change. It's only then when you start making change. So that might take you a couple of weeks to just get that all dialed in effectively, so you're able to then start to improve the quality of your muscle health and start to reap all those benefits from a back health point of view, but also, again, from that metabolic health point of view too. And then we get on to point number 3. For those of you in the UK, this is kind of a NHS principle, and that's nutrition, hydration, and sleep. Ultimately, when we are working out, when we're working on that muscle, we are breaking the muscle down. We are causing muscular damage when we're working at the appropriate intensity. Too much damage, we get an injury. But the right amount of damage, provided with the right nutrition, the right hydration, and sleeping appropriately, is going to allow our body to recover, but not only recover back up. So if we came into the session with this level of quality of our muscles, we damage them a little bit through the workout, and then we heal overnight and we come back up to here. And now all of a sudden we've improved the health, the strength, the capacity of that muscle tissue. And that is that positive adaptation process. Now, again, this brings back into the positive feedback loop of the more efficient our body's metabolic health becomes, the better we can use that nutrition that's coming on board to fuel that recovery process, and so on and so forth. So the whole system starts to get dialed in more and more and more. But we cannot avoid providing our body with the appropriate nutrition and the appropriate hydration. Much of our body, our muscles, weight is going to be water. We have to appropriately hydrate the body. We can't just starve it of nutrition or starve it of hydration and expect it to function effectively. And then we must provide those things outside of the session as well, so that we can sleep. So that we can take advantage with good sleep and allow our body to recover, because it's when we're sleeping that recovery process is really taking place. And then there's the final thing. Point number 4 is going to be keep it consistent. You have to be consistent with these sorts of things over the long term. You can't do it for a week. You can't do it for a couple of weeks. You can't just do it for a month. You have to commit to making positive change part and parcel of your daily life. As I've said, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 sessions a week, sometimes you might be able to get those 5 sessions in. And then you go through seasons where you can only get 3, but always do your best to get 3. We can all, no matter what, spare 90 minutes a week of time to actually do some good workouts and just maybe keep things going through this busy spell where maybe life's in the way, work's in the way, family life, etc. Things are happening. And then we can go back, maybe do 4 or 5 sessions a week to continue our progression and continue making improvements. So hopefully that's been a helpful episode. Maybe makes you think about a different aspect or a different benefit from being consistent with the work you're doing to build your back. Yes, you've got to do the right exercises to build and restore and recover from lower back pain. But if you do those right exercises in the way we've just discussed, following those 4 steps, then you're really going to make some significant inroads and improvements to your lower back health, the recovery of any lower back injuries you do have, the protection from future injuries for your lower back, reducing the risk of injury. But you're also going to start to improve your metabolic health, which means you're going to be feeling better, functioning better, and working better as an organism on a daily basis. And that's going to only positively compound the results that you're seeing and your quality of life and your ability to do the things that you want. Hopefully you found this slightly different episode interesting and helpful. If you have, share it with someone that could use or could benefit from hearing this message, hearing a little bit about their metabolic health and how maybe it's the thing that will motivate them to start making some positive changes too. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.